Hey guys, what's up? So let us discuss the major acts, conventions, protocols, and bodies. And this is the part one. And we will continue this discussion and we will discuss all the conventions, protocols, bodies which you need to know for various government examinations. And so let us start with convention and protocol. So convention is a framework in which the parties here does not mean party Saturday night parties here means countries or nations decide the basic guidelines without delving into the painstaking details कि भाई we will reduce carbon footprint. So that is the basic guideline. It is not saying कि we will reduce falana tons of carbon by so and so date, and if it is not done then what will happen, and so on and so forth. So a convention begins as an international meeting. People meet, they share concerns, and then they arrive कि okay, we will do this, of representatives from many nations that results in general agreement about procedures or actions they will take on specific topics. Is it clear? While a protocol is where specifics are decided. For example, I'll give the best example. So Narendra Modi government says कि everybody will have bank account. So that is like a convention. But protocol is who will be the deciding authority, how will it be implemented, till when all the bank accounts will be there, what do you mean by bank account, is Paytm account also considered a bank account, and so on and so forth. So protocol to the convention is where the parties set specific aims or legal obligations. If it is not done, then what will be the case, who will be responsible. So while a convention encourages the parties to meet the goals, a protocol commits them to do so. So please remember this difference between convention and protocol. It will go a long way. So first we will start with the United Nations Conventions to combat desertification. So it is for those countries who are experiencing serious drought and or desertification, particularly in Africa. It is to combat desertification and mitigate the effects of drought through national action programs, and it incorporates long-term strategies which are supported by international cooperation and partnership arrangements. So mainly it is to combat desertification, means like conversion of a normal land into a desert like area, and that will lead to drought. For example, sub-Saharan Africa is very prone to desertification. Now, principles of participation, partnership, decentralization, and address arid, semi-arid, and dry subhumid areas known as dryland, where some of the most vulnerable ecosystems and people can be found. So this is there about United Nations Convention to combat desertification. It is the first and the only internationally legal binding framework to address the problem of desertification. Now you might think it is not a big problem, but it is a really painful and very big problem. So please take it seriously. And in 2007, 10-year strategy of the United Nations Convention to combat desertification by 2008 to 2018 was adopted with the following aim: to forge a global partnership, means to establish a global partnership to reverse, first of all, whatever has happened, reverse that and prevent future desertification or land degradation, and to mitigate means hota hai you can't cure it completely, but you can manage it. For example, mitigation of diabetes, mitigation of cancer pain, etc. So to mitigate the effects of drought, minimize it as much as possible in affected areas in order to support poverty reduction and environmental sustainability. Then second is Convention on the Conservation of Migratory Species of Wild Animals, CMS, or it is also called as Bonn Convention of 1983. So it is a place, they are very famously asking all these places where it is located. So it is located in Germany on the river Rhine. The aim of this CMS is to conserve terrestrial, marine and avian migratory species throughout their range. Range means wherever they live, their habitat, their environment, their niche. An intergovernmental treaty, it was concluded under the aegis of United Nations Environment Programme UNEP, and it was concerned with the conservation of wildlife and habitats on a global scale. Appendix 1 of this deals with the threatened migratory species, and Appendix 2 deals with the migratory species requiring international cooperation. So these are the two appendix to CMS. Now the third is the Ramsar Convention. So Ramsar is a city in Iran. Okay, Iran is a country in Middle East where it was ratified in 1971. It is an international treaty for the conservation and sustainable utilization of wetlands, recognizing the fundamental ecological functions of wetlands, their economic, cultural, scientific and recreational value. So this is the Ramsar Convention. Now definition of wetland is areas of marine water the depth of which at low tide does not exceed 6 meters. So this is the definition. So they can ask you low tide versus high tide, 6 meters versus 8 meters, marine water versus fresh water, etc. So by this definition there are more than 2000 wetlands worldwide. Now, wetlands are one of the most threatened of all ecosystems in India. The major causes are loss of vegetation, salinization means increasing salt concentration, excessive inundation, water pollution obviously because of effluents, industrial pollution, invasive species like a Cornea crassipus, okay, like sorrow of Bengal, excessive development like buildings, roads, constructions, etc. So these all lead to destruction of wetlands. Now, important wetlands of India includes Ashtamudi wetland, it is in Kerala, so please remember the name. Vembanad coal wetland in Kerala. Chilika lake, like I have visited, it's beautiful. It has Eravati dolphins, it is in Odisha. Then Kevladev National Park, it is in Rajasthan. It is a very famous national park. Loktak Lake, again very famous, very famous. Kibul Lamjao, you might have heard about it. Floating, okay, called as Fumdis. So it is in Manipur, that is the northeastern state of India. Sambhar Lake is very close to Jaipur in Rajasthan. And Wooler Lake is in Jammu and Kashmir. It's a beautiful lake. So these are the important wetlands of India. They can ask you match the following. Now let's go on to Basel Convention. So earlier it was known as the Basel Convention on the control of transboundary movements of hazardous waste and their disposal. And specifically it is there to prevent transfer of hazardous waste from developed to less developed countries, that is LDCs. And it will minimize the amount and toxicity of waste generated to ensure their environmentally sound management as close as possible to the source of generation. So wherever it is generated, you kill it then and there. And to assist LDCs, that is least developed countries, in environmentally sound management of the hazardous and other waste they generate. It also deals with the electronic waste. Electronic waste is like, they can ask you what is electronic waste, which chemicals are there in electronic waste. It was asked in prelims. So which describes discarded electrical or electronic devices like mobile phones, television sets, refrigerators, cathode ray tubes, and it may contain contaminants like, these are important terms, remember them: lead, cadmium, beryllium, brominated flame retardants. So these can be asked in your MCQs. But the major criticism of Basel Convention is that it does not address the movement of radioactive waste. That is why it is a failure on that part. Then you have Convention on Long Range Transboundary Air Pollution, that is also called as CLR TAP. So it is also called as Air Pollution Convention, and it is intended to protect the human environment against air pollution and to gradually reduce and prevent air pollution, including long range transboundary air pollution. So do you understand that point? And few of the common substances which are banned or eliminated under these conventions include Basel, Rotterdam, Stockholm, CLR TAP, and they include aldrin, chlordane, hexachlorobenzene, lindane, heptachlor, etc. Then you have Minamata Convention on Mercury. So Minamata city in Japan. What happened was they ate a lot of mercury poisoning fishes and seafood. It led to lots of paralysis, death, vision issues, nervous system issues. So it was a place in Japan. An international treaty designed to protect human health and the environment from anthropogenic means human beings, emissions means like releasing in the environment, mercury and mercury compounds. Just remember M for M, Minamata for mercury. So in 1956, large-scale public health crisis occurred due to mercury poisoning, such as Minamata disease, which is a neurological disease causing symptoms of ataxia. Numbness means you lose the feeling. General muscle weakness means muscles go atrophy, you can't work properly, you can't walk, run. Narrowing of the field of vision, you can't see throughout. Damage to hearing and speech, paralysis, even death. So all these are nervous system symptoms. So it became an official Japanese eco-town in 2001. So Minamata is a place in Japan. They can ask you which country is it associated with. Then Geneva Protocol. So protocol for the prohibition of use in war of asphyxiating, poisonous or other gas and of bacteriological methods of warfare in Geneva Protocol. So it is a treaty which prohibits and biological weapons in international armed conflicts, and it prohibits the use of asphyxiating, poisonous or other gases and of all analogous liquids, materials or devices and bacteriological methods of warfare. And specific treaties like 1972 Biological Weapons Convention, 1993 Chemical Weapons Convention also covers it in exhaustive details. Then you have Stockholm Convention on Persistent Organic Pollutants. So it aims to eliminate or restrict the production and use of persistent organic pollutants. So POPs are the chemical substances that persist in the environment, bioaccumulate through the food web, and they pose a risk of causing adverse effects to human health and the environment. Exception is DDT is allowed to use publicly for control of malaria. So that is exception to Stockholm Convention on persistent organic pollutants. Persistent means they will stay in the environment, they will just not go away. So developed countries provide new and additional financial resources and measures to eliminate the production and use of intentionally produced POPs. Obviously there are unintentional, but you eliminate the unintentionally produced POPs wherever feasible and manage and dispose of POPs waste in an environmentally friendly manner so that it does not harm the environment. Then you have the last convention for this lesson is Rotterdam Convention. We'll continue the part 2. So it is convention on PIC, that is prior informed consent procedure for certain hazardous chemicals and pesticides in international trade. If you are like trading them, so you need to have prior informed consent that these are hazardous chemicals. So again, like just tell me in which country Rotterdam is in the comments below. It is a multilateral treaty to promote shared responsibilities in relation to importation of hazardous chemicals, and the convention promotes open exchange of information, and it calls on exporters of hazardous chemicals to use proper labeling, including directions on safe handling, and inform purchasers of any known restrictions or bans. And signatory nations can decide whether to allow or ban the importation of chemicals listed in the treaty, and exporting countries are obliged to make sure that producers within their jurisdiction comply. So for on this ground, Canada refused to allow the addition of chrysolite asbestos fibers to the Rotterdam Convention, which ideally it should have because it is very dangerous to human beings. Okay, so it is like it was because they were trading it and they don't want to lose out on the commercial aspect. But now they say they will not oppose its inclusion in future meetings. So we will continue the discussion. Thank you for watching this. Guys, what's up? So this is the part 2 of major acts, conventions, protocols and bodies related to environment, global warming, protection, etc. etc. I've already covered few in part 1. So we'll start with the Vienna Convention. So it came into effect in 1988 for the protection of the ozone layer. So simple question which comes is Vienna Convention is related to what? The reduction of greenhouse gas emissions or whatever it is, but it is overall for the protection of ozone layer. Okay, so you have to remember that. Don't get confused. Indirect things does not work. Vienna means ozone, nothing else. So it does not include legally binding reduction goals for the use of CFCs. Please write the full form in the comments. The main chemical agents causing ozone depletion. So CFCs are the main chemical reason why ozone is depleted, and these are laid out in the accompanying Montreal Protocol. So as I've already told you, the difference between convention and protocol is convention is like an overall agreement. Protocol is something specific and which is legally binding. In Montreal Protocol on the substances that deplete the ozone layer, so a protocol to the Vienna Convention for the protection of ozone layer, it is an international treaty designed to protect the ozone layer. How? By phasing out, means gradually eliminating the production of numerous substances that are responsible for ozone depletion. Is it okay? Since the Montreal Protocol came into effect, like whenever it came into effect, the atmospheric concentration of the most important CFCs and related chlorinated hydrocarbons have either leveled off or decreased. So it means that it is working. It is working. Why it is working? Because it is showing in the results that CFCs and related chlorinated hydrocarbons are being reduced. And due to this, the ozone hole which was above Antarctica, it is slowly recovering, and climate projections indicate that when 1980 levels are considered perfect for ozone, so between 2050 and 2070 it will be the same. Then Montreal Protocol will include the chlorofluorocarbons, that is CFC's phase out management plan. Then you have hydrofluorocarbons, that is HCFC's phase out management plan, HPMP. And it does not deal with hydrofluorocarbons, it does not deal with HFCs. It is a very important concept, and they are extremely potent greenhouse gases, so they also threaten the environment, but they do not do anything about ozone. But unfortunately that is the way, because it is produced in the developed countries. So it is produced mostly in the developed countries. HFCs replace CFCs and HCFCs. Now HFC does not cause harm to the ozone layer. It is like saying that the drugs which are giving is not harmful to the liver, but they will kill your heart. So anyway they should not be given, but unfortunately they are saying it is not harmful for the ozone, so we will not do anything about it. HFC poses no harm to the ozone layer because they do not contain chlorine, but they are extremely potent greenhouse gases and hence should be regulated. So the Montreal Protocol does not address HFCs, so this is an important concept, but these substances figure in the basket of 6 greenhouse gases under the Kyoto Protocol. Now, developed countries following the Kyoto Protocol report their HFC emission data to UNFCCC, which is now also called as Paris Climate Agreement, but parties to the Montreal Protocol have no such obligation. So again, this is important. So perhaps this is the single most successful international agreement to date which has worked perfectly, and the two ozone treaties, they have been ratified by 197 parties. So almost all the major countries of the world have signed it. It includes 196 states and the European Union, making them the first universally ratified treaties in United Nations history, where all the major countries have ratified it. It is the first universally ratified treaty. Now, precautionary principle, this concept is very important. You should know about it. Precautionary principle means if you do not know the impact of it and it might affect the environment, you should not do it. Okay, so if introduction of a new product or process whose ultimate effects are disputed or unknown or not certain, they should be registered. For example, it is used to prohibit the import of GMOs and their introduction to the food crops, because you don't know what havoc they might create. Although it is not proven they will do anything, but you will be using precaution, you will be using prevention. So entire premise of conservation of biodiversity, countering global warming and climate change is based on this argument of precautionary principle. If an action or policy has a suspected risk of causing harm to the environment and living organisms, and in the absence of scientific consensus that the action or policy is not harmful, the burden of proof that it is not harmful falls on taking an action. For example, if you can't prove that HFCs are bad, for example, there is no research, but it will be the burden on the other person to prove that it is not bad, okay, because you can't prove either of the way. GMOs are safe, nobody can say that. You can say GMOs might not be harmful, but nobody can say GMOs are safe. So unless that is proven 100% they are safe, you will not do anything because it might harm the environment and biodiversity. This is called as the precautionary principle. Now, it will justify discretionary situations where scientific investigation has found a plausible risk. For example, what if it converts into a virus and it destroys everything on the humanity like plague did in 14th century? And when extensive scientific knowledge on the matter is lacking, it implies a social responsibility on the part of government to protect the public from exposure to harm. It is a very important concept, you should know about it. In short, whenever there is a threat of significant reduction or loss of biological diversity, lack of full scientific certainty should not be used as a reason for postponing measures to avoid, minimize, or mitigating such a threat. For example, if global warming is not happening, assume, still you should do something to prevent it, because if it is happening, then it will create havoc. Then you have Convention on Biological Diversity. It is also called as Biodiversity Convention, and it is a key document regarding sustainable development. Its three main goals include conservation of biological diversity, also called as biodiversity, sustainable use of its components, and fair and equitable sharing of benefits from genetic resources so that the local population is also benefited. Okay, so these three are very important. They will be asked in MCQ. Now, objective is to develop national strategies for the conservation and sustainable use of biological diversity. And 2010 was the International Year of Biodiversity, and 2011 to 2020 is the United Nations Decade on Biodiversity. So this is Convention on Biological Diversity. Now, CBD covers biodiversity at all the possible levels: ecosystem level, species level, genetic resources, etc. And convention was opened for signature at the Earth Summit. It is very, very famous in Rio de Janeiro. It is in Brazil, which is in South America. Okay, on 5th June 1992, and it entered into force about 1.5 years ago in 29 December 1993. And till date, there are 193 parties to it. And Secretariat of the Convention on Biological Diversity (SCBD) is located at Montreal in Canada. So these questions are important. Now, convention is legally binding, and countries that joins it, which are called as parties, are obliged to implement its provisions. And and convention reiterates means again and again say that natural resources are not infinite. You have to remember that nothing is infinite except solar energy, and which will also perish after billions of years. And it sets out a philosophy of sustainable use. And substantial investment are required to conserve biodiversity, but conservation will bring significant environmental, economic, and social benefits in return. So these are important concepts. Then you have COPs. Okay, so in 2006, the COP8 was held in Brazil. 2012 COP Convention on Parties was held in Hyderabad, which was development of worldwide view on biodiversity. Then in 2014, COP12 was held in Biodiversity for Sustainable Development in Pyongyang, Republic of Korea. In 2016, COP13, it was held in Cancun, Mexico. Then important measures under convention includes measures and incentives for the conservation and sustainable use of biological diversity, regulated access to genetic resources and traditional knowledge, including prior informed consent of the party providing resources, and sharing them in a fair and equitable way, the results of research and development and the benefits arising from the commercial and other utilization of genetic resources with the contracting party. It can be commercial or any other utilization, for example patent and credit, etc. And providing such resources, government or local communities that provided the traditional knowledge or biodiversity resources utilized. So all in all, everybody should benefit basically, and it should be regulated. Then you have access to and transfer of technology, including biotechnology, to the governments and or local communities that provided traditional knowledge. So they should not be harmed, they should not be exploited. And then you have technical and scientific cooperation. So basically a coordination of a global directory of taxonomic expertise, that is global taxonomy initiative, impact assessment, what is happening because of this initiative. Then you have IEC, information, education and communication. Then you have provision of financial resources and national reporting and efforts to implement treaty commitments. Then finally agenda 21, it is a non-binding voluntary, it is asked often in the exams, implemented action plan of the United Nations with regard to sustainable development, and it is a byproduct of UNCED, that is UN Conference on Environment and Development on Earth Summit, which was held in Rio, Brazil in 1992, and it is an action agenda for the United Nations, other multilateral organizations and individual government around the world that can be executed at local, national and global level. And the 21, this is what is asked, the 21 in agenda 21 refers to the 21st century. Until date there are 193 parties to it. And at the 2010 10th Conference of Parties to the Convention on Biological Diversity in Nagoya, Japan, the Nagoya Protocol was adopted. So this is also very important. And it has various sub-programs and agreements. They include these three, which I will be discussing in a subsequent lecture. Cartagena Protocol on Biosafety. It will cover the rapidly expanding field of biotechnology, addressing technology development and transfer, benefit sharing, biosafety issue, etc. Then you have Global Strategy for Plant Conservation, and then you have Nagoya Protocol on access to genetic resources and the fair and equitable sharing of benefits arising from their utilization. So we will continue this series later on. I hope you have liked it. Have an awesome day.